Today I'm going to show you how to make 3 different World War I LEGO trench builds. The first will be basic, affordable and easy, the second will be a bit more advanced, and the third will be so difficult that honestly I'm not convinced I can actually do it myself. Yes, this is basically the Noob Pro God tier trend that everybody knows and hates. If you can't beat him, join him. Each of the 3 builds will have a different LEGO World War I minifigure army. The Noob tier build will go to the French minifigures, the Pro tier build will go to the British minifigures, and the God tier build will go to the German minifigures. So let's get started. First up is the Noob tier build. The aims for this build are as follows. It must be affordable, it must be easy to build, but crucially it still needs to be high quality. Today I'm going to show you that even if you're completely broke and you don't have many LEGO parts, you can still make a really nice LEGO World War I build. To prove it, I will be using 2 types of LEGO parts for this video. LEGO plates, which look like this, and LEGO bricks, which look like this. Okay, so the logical first step is to get ourselves a 32 by 32 base plate. We then need to put a surface layer of dark brown plates, which I will be getting from this absolute mess here. Yeah, I'm gonna be getting them from in here. You know what? Let's put this on the floor.
A few moments later.
And voila, we have 1 dark brown base plate. The main colors I'm going to use for this noob tier build are reddish brown, and dark tan. And you'll find out why soon enough. Now, I probably don't need to remind you that one of the main aims for this build is that it's going to be affordable. However, taking just a quick look at the French minifigure army, you can probably see that these are definitely not affordable and are in fact very expensive. All of these minifigures are real LEGO, and most of them have accessories and custom weapons. But not to worry, because this is an easy fix. For example, look at these LEGO Napoleonic Wars minifigures, or rather, sorry, they're knockoff, they're not actually real, but they're just as high quality. This right here is 60 minifigures, and it cost me a grand total of £60.
Which, in case it needs to be spelled out, is about £1 per minifigure, or $1.25 per minifigure in freedom units.
Basically, the point I'm trying to make is that you can do this on a budget. You just need to know where to look. So I'd recommend checking out AliExpress or Etsy if you're interested. And now back to the building. We have our dark brown base plates, and of course, let's not forget the terrain that we're actually going to be trying to build is going to look a bit more like this. So that is what we're going to go for, and so in order to reach that, the first thing we're going to do is we're now going to try and build up the terrain. Think of it like this. The soil at the bottom is more wet, damp and moist, but the topsoil is more dry from exposure to the sun. By balancing out those 2 colors and keeping it tiered, it really helps make it look nice. As you can probably tell, again, we're trying to keep this as basic, affordable and easy as possible. It's more or less, it's going to be a mound rather than a trench. It's a one-sided trench, okay, let's call it that. More bricks. Now, hopefully by this point, you can see roughly what we're going for. This back section here is going to be the trench, and then the terrain is going to slowly fade away down this hill here. Again, we're keeping this one really, really basic. As we're going, pay attention to how I'm placing the bricks, okay? It doesn't want to look completely square. Terrain is never like 90-degree angles, okay? So you want these staggered edges. You want it to look a bit rough around the edges. Now, you'll notice that it's now just all dark brown, and so what we're going to do now is the inside of this gap down the bottom here, we're now going to make it look like it's actually a downtrodden part of the inside of the trench. It should be a little bit different from the rest of the terrain around it. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start placing some dark tan. Yes, we're finally using dark tan. Okay, it's starting to come together a little bit. The important thing is to have visually distinct regions on your LEGO build. So you want to have an area that's very clearly no man's land, and in a separate area that's very clearly the trenches. And by using different colors, it makes it a lot easier to achieve that result. So I've gone ahead and pre-prepared some of these reddish brown plates, which again is going to give us the effect of a top surface layer of soil which has been dried out by the sun, and the bits below are all the wet, damp, moist soil. So we've placed down the 4x4s and the 2x2s, and now we're going to move on to the 1 single plate studs, but I want to explain how I'm choosing where to place these plates. Now, I'm sure the placement might look very random to a lot of you, but trust me, it's not. Essentially, what you do is you fill out the area with plates, and then you kind of look for where there's kind of large, obvious gaps, and then you fill in those gaps, and then once you've got smaller gaps, you then move on to the even smaller gaps. Before I go over to the 1x1s, I'm first going to do a bit more work on the back here because it looks a bit neglected. Okay, I think we're almost at what I'm looking to achieve here with the back section there. I now need to finish off the density in this midsection. So you can still hear me because I've now got a nice Bluetooth mic. You can probably see me on that camera. Let me show you what I'm picking away at and what I was doing last night. Yeah, that used to be the big old Lego trench build, and this is, honestly, I wish I had enough money to pay like an intern to do this, because good God. Basically, I'm picking parts off the floor on a towel. And with that done, we're now ready to place the French minifigures onto the noob tier build. Now remember, this was built only using plates and bricks, and that of 3 different colors, the third of which was barely used at all. The noob tier trench is easy to build, it's affordable, and honestly, I still think it looks pretty good. Now, I do have a Lego World War I tank, the Renault FT, which I could have used in this build, but I do kind of feel like that would defeat the purpose of a noob tier build. However, for the pro tier build, I have a British Lego Mark IV tank, and for the God tier build, I have a camouflaged German Lego A7V tank, both of which from Brick by Design. However, before we get to that, let's finally add the finishing touches to the noob tier build by placing our minifigures. This gentleman over here, I'm going to put at the top of the trench, and he's going to be facing backwards because he's calling out the charge. He's firing his gun, calling the entire French army forward over the top. Now, I've also got a French machine gun team, and I'm going to get them running through the trench as if they're running to set up their machine gun position. The man at the very front will be this French soldier with the gas mask and label ready to go to war. There's also going to be a guy who's got a nice winter jacket, and we're going to just make him chill. He's just going to be watching everyone go over the top whilst he has a nice time. And there we have it, the French World War I charge over the trench. This is the noob tier build, and hopefully now you'll realize why it's so important that we put the bottom layer, the edges look like they're kind of terrain. It just looks more natural. And it essentially just looks better. Now remember, I have made use of expensive Lego minifigures, but you can get cheap ones from Etsy or AliExpress. It doesn't matter. This noob tier build is affordable, it's easy to build, and I think it's pretty good. I think it's probably one of my better builds, to be honest. Next up is the pro tier build. This build will be elevated by a black wall, and the terrain will gradually be built up using wedges, showcased very clearly by this mini trench mock. Compared to the noob tier build, the pro tier build will be noticeably more expensive because it just requires a lot more parts. However, it's not just, I don't know why I threw it, it's not just more expensive, it's also a lot more difficult and time consuming. If you have the time, money, and patience to do so, the pro tier build will look noticeably more professional than the noob tier build. Straight away, you might be wondering what I'm doing placing these wedges like that before putting the floor down. This is a bit more difficult, and I'll try to explain my reasoning. What I'm doing is I'm trying to figure out where the floor actually needs to go, because once we've built up multiple layers of wedges deep enough in order for it to actually be a trench, then all of a sudden it's going to be right at the back over here. So you have to basically build from the bottom up. This will be the flooring of the trench. Now, if you're wondering why I've once again decided to build this in the corner rather than making use of the center ground here, it's because I've got a new Lego tank, the Mark IV, and unlike my old Mark IV, which literally doesn't even fit a base plate, which by the way is why I don't really use it anymore, this new Mark IV from Brick by Design will be small enough to fit the build, and it will be driving through no man's land approximately here. But before we get to that and see how it matches up to the original Mark IV, I first want to get a bit more terrain down so we can see where it's actually gonna go, which is why I've collected up a series of wedges, like these slightly larger wedges and also these slightly smaller wedges, and the idea is that we use these in combination to build up the terrain. Now, I'll show you roughly what I mean by placing all of the different wedge types I've actually got. This is the largest one. Of course, it comes in a left and a right variation. I've then also got a 4, like so. Then we have a series of wedges which increasingly get larger, like so. So you can see this is 2x2 with a corner, 3x3 with a corner, and we've also got 4x4 with a corner. The largest of which I believe is this, which is a 8x8 with a corner. And the idea is that using these in combination, in conjunction, you can get a terrain which hopefully, well, you can't see because I've got these minifigures on here, but if you look at the original build before I had minifigures, you can see how you can layer it up layer by layer to get a nice gradual incline which looks natural. Hopefully you can take something away from this and apply these building techniques to your own Lego World War I trench builds. So what I personally like to do is you don't want it to look too even, too symmetrical, too straight, so you kind of use different parts to get that variation. Okay, so we've got our base layer down, the first layer of gradient, and again, we just need to continue building those layers up until we've got a trench that's deep enough to hide a minifigure.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Oh, fine, yourself?
Yeah, good, thanks.
Okay, that's
Perfect. Have a good Christmas.
You too.
Cheers, bye-bye. Okay, exciting news. Right this very moment, I've just received a delivery, and I think it literally might be more Lego parts, which I need to save me from that down there. If this isn't even Lego, I swear. Yes, okay. This is how every man should open a box. Just brute force it. All right, what have we got? We've got reddish brown plates, very useful. Dark brown plates, red bricks, and some white plates. Now, I'm quite sick of building that trench, so let's get on to the Mark IV British tank. Once we know where it's actually gonna go and how much space it occupies, we can then build the wedges around it. Before I forget, let's start a timer, because, I don't know, timers are fun. As we approach 45 minutes on the Mark IV build from Brick by Design, honestly, it's actually probably got more detail than the big Mark IV that's got a lot more space to work with. I am very impressed with how well this is put together so far. So that, I guess, would be the other side that goes on here again once we get the track links over there. Now, I believe we then just slap that on. And there we go, that's both sides of the track now onto the Mark IV. Then we can slap this side part on here. And there we have it, the Mark IV British World War I tank from Brick by Design has been completed, ready to be added to the Pro, just bumped something, Pro tier build. And not to mention, for the God tier build, we've got a camouflaged A7V for the Germans. So let's first figure out where this goes. So if we take our Pro tier build down, this is, oops, I've broken something already. Great. This is where we really get a feel for why this build is so much more appropriate for LEGO World War I trench builds, because it doesn't dominate the entire mock. Now, I just had an idea actually. What I'm probably gonna do is I might place it here. And so it's driving, it's driving over an allied trench. What we can then do is get the British in this trench facing that direction. That I think would work quite nicely. Okay, and there we go, nice and easy. We've managed to get ourselves one single plate layer of black wall all the way around the outside. So what we want to roughly do is kind of follow the actual, like the incline, the gradient on the trench on the side here using black slopes. And as simple as that, we've now got a 2-high black wall all the way around the base plate. Now the reason this is so important and the reason this makes it a Pro tier build is it basically creates like a platform. It defines, it showcases your build and just makes it a little bit more visually distinct rather than just being really basic. Okay, so I'm very aware this looks quite funky, and you might be wondering why on earth I'm using red bricks. Well, even though this is the Pro tier build, and again, it's gonna use more parts, it's gonna be more complicated and expensive, we still want to minimize how many parts we're using where possible. So we're basically creating a platform, a standoff, to then cover with reddish brown plates, so we get the platform in the color we want, but we don't have to completely fill it with bricks in the process. Now, I imagine this is gonna make a lot more sense when I actually place them down. And there we go, pretty simply, pretty quickly, pretty easily, we've got an entire surface layer of reddish brown and a wall around the outside that matches the profile of the trench. Now this is essentially a sandbox layer. It's the right color, it's completely flat, and if we want to build layers of wedges upon it, we can easily do that. Now that we've got the wall around the outside and a nice platform to build up those layers of wedges, we now basically just need to build up layers of wedges. Basically the same as what we did inside the trench, but just a slightly less aggressive, a more natural slope, like shallow gradient. And then we need to put the tank on, then we need to put the minifigures on, probably do a bit of detailing as well because this is the Pro tier build. Okay, so we've now done a very basic bit of terrain detailing. You can see it's a less severe slope, so you still get that depth, but it doesn't look so brutal and tragic as the trench down here. I hope you will probably agree this looks a bit boring. It's bland, it's all one color. It doesn't have much variety or detail. Let's fix that. Now, there's a few ways we can get a little bit of depth into this and also just make it look a bit more interesting. I don't want to use tiles because it's just the Pro tier build, so what we will do is use more plates plate. So specifically 1x1 studs over here, and also 2x2 circular plates. I don't really know. It's circles basically. And then once you place the largest ones down like so, you then want to move on to the smaller ones, and again, just gradually like whittle down the density. If there's a big open space with nothing in it, place it there, move on to the next one. Now, hopefully you'll agree that putting just a bit of a different color on there and just kind of distributing it evenly really helps pop it out a little bit, brings it to life, makes it look a bit more real and less flat. And with that, I think we're just about ready to place the tank and the British LEGO minifigures. Okay, so I suppose it is crunch time. Time to decide where the tank actually goes. Let's have a look. Where do we think this should go? What do we think? Something like that? And to stop it from moving around, I've actually kind of fixed it firmly in place, so hopefully it won't fall off or move around. And so now, the logical next step is to place the British minifigures, which will be accompanying the Mark IV tank, on the Pro tier build. And with that, we now have our Pro tier build. The Pro tier build has been finished, completed with a Mark IV British tank making its way through no man's land, completely unaware that it's about to run down a casualty that's desperately trying to make an escape on crutches. A team of medics is trying to get a second casualty to safety as British soldiers are advancing through the trenches towards the enemy. Compared to the noob tier build, the Pro tier build feels more substantial with its black walled baseplate. I would say the main mistake I made on the Pro tier build, which makes it not look quite so interesting, is because I made it all with reddish brown wedges. I should have made it with dark tan wedges inside the trench, which would then give a difference between, you would see very clearly where the dug terrain is, but it all kind of blends into one a bit too much. And now with that, let's move on to the God tier build. This build will specifically make use of slopes and tiles to get a much cleaner, stud-free build aesthetic, which to be honest, isn't really demonstrated very clearly by this baseplate here. In fact, this isn't what we're doing really, to be honest. Now I'm sure you'll agree that's probably enough yapping for now. Let's get to building. Now, compared to the Pro tier build, what makes the God tier build stand out is because the walls around the outside are actually going to be a platform we can work with. Now, hopefully this is quite self-explanatory what I have done here. I've essentially created a platform that goes around the side, which we can build onto. Unlike the Pro tier build, where it's just a black wall, we can't use that surface. We can now build onto this surface. Now, this might not seem particularly important, but it's actually quite good because it gives us a lot more flexibility. Now, if you're wondering specifically what I did to do this, it's really quite simple. As you can see, I've got this one part here. All this is a plate. I've got a couple more plates on the back that just kind of help give it a bit more structure, and then it's this part here, but simply surround the edge of your base plate with those and you're good to go. That is now our foundational wall down. Now, with the wall built around the outside of the base plate, I've been giving a lot of thought to how I actually detail it, and I came up with a few different ideas, and I'm not quite sure which I'm going to go with yet, but let me show you. There's a whole different bunch of ways I could do this. If I wanted to kind of create like a sandy layer, you would simply just create a dark tan layer, and then you could stick that onto the side. I also toyed around with just, I don't know, this weird kind of sloping aesthetic, but I also came up with a few interesting ideas which I would like to try and I haven't quite perfected yet. If I was to place these on the side, you can kind of get an idea now of how, instead of just a walled base plate, you can see we can get an interesting kind of rocky, I don't know, what wall. You can tell I don't really know what I'm doing with it yet, but I continued playing around with that, and I also came up with a few different suggestions. Now, for the sake of argument, I'm actually just going to place this on like so. Now, hopefully you can see, hopefully you'll agree as well, that just looks considerably more interesting than just a blank wall. It makes it look more professional. So for the time being, again, I'm just going to stick this on here. Again, I don't know which of these I'm actually going to use. And then if I spin that around like so, you can now see we've got two options. We've got this kind of thicker, dark gray slope, and we've got this thinner sloped region here with different types of grays. And then, yes, further still, I've got another few options. This is quite simple. It's purely just studs and tiles. It doesn't quite do it for me, not compared to the other two. But again, we're just playing around with options. And just because we got 4 sides, and just to demonstrate, you really can just put anything on this and it gives you full creative freedom, I'm going to slap this on. And there you have it. You've got a really cursed base plate with 4 completely different sides. It looks ridiculous. But the reason I'm showing it to you is because I'm trying to demonstrate why this is the God tier build. Essentially, I've got the flexibility to add them back at the end. It's not what we need to focus on. I need to get the foundational layer in first. Okay, so we're back to square one. So let's now get the foundations in. And there we go. Next bit has been completed. We've got a foundational layer in again, which we can use to build anything upon. Now, obviously, at the moment, you can see there's kind of a big gap around, and there's some brown parts that are exposed as well, which doesn't look great for a God tier build. So we're going to use a lot of tiles now, because that's what this is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be slopes and tiles to minimize the amount of studs we actually use on the build. I also have these tiles. Let's push this back and just... Professional at work. Stand clear. And voila, we have our platform. Now, the reason I've done that is because once we build on top of this, it means that we're not going to see studs underneath the parts we're placing down, because we've got tiles. We'll be building over tiles. And with that, let's get the layer of reddish brown. It doesn't even have to be reddish brown, but I'll use it anyway. Just cuz. Oh, why? What has happened to this bit of Lego? I hope they don't all do that. Okay. Why? Some of these are literally like, look at this. What is this? Lego is not supposed to literally crumble like that. And there we go. We've got our foundational layer of reddish brown, which again, we'll be building slopes over the edge that overlap onto the tiles, and we won't see any studs underneath it. However, just like we did on the Pro tier build, we've got a Lego tank to construct for the God tier build, and this one is a camouflaged A7V. This bad boy here, once again, kindly supplied by Brick by Design. I'm really starting to hoard his tanks now. I think I've got 5. Okay, everything, it only took me 3 minutes to open all the packages. I better get started, shall I? So the A7V is coming along quite nicely. You can see I've got the foundational hull elements on, the tracks are in, and the main kind of tower, the main structure, I don't really know what to call it in an A7V. It doesn't have a turret, it just basically just is a turret. So I'm just going to quickly finish this off, and then we'll pick up once I'm done.
Eventually.
And there we go. The clock has been stopped. 59 minutes and 31 seconds, under an hour, and we have ourselves an A7V camouflaged German World War I Lego tank. Props to the designer of this Lego World War I tank. This is incredibly intricate, which is both good and bad. It's got a lot of detail crammed into not a lot of space, but if you bump it, it will literally disassemble itself in front of your eyes. Let me show you what I mean. Now, one of the most impressive things about the tank is the fact that they've got the angles right. Now, doing angles like this is very difficult, and so it's a very intricate, detailed design in order to achieve that. Some pieces, though, as a result, are literally like barely attached. I mean, this whole section here is literally like there's a single stud of contact. But let's have a quick look. If I open this up, if I take these parts off, as you can see, there's a lot of detail on like the inside. In fact, you know what? You could probably actually get a crew inside here. Now, the next thing we need to do is actually get it onto the platform, but we need to do a lot more work. Remember, this is supposed to be the God tier build. At the moment, we've got a nice base plate. We've also got some walls waiting on the corner over here. But presently, this looks absolutely bumhole. It really looks awful. So I've got some work to do, and I'm probably going to check back tomorrow once I've figured out how to make this a God tier build, because at the minute, both the noob tier and the pro tier build look like they might be better. So after a night of off-camera building, this is what the God tier build currently looks like. Now, I know what you might be thinking, it looks like a completely different build, but actually what I've done is really quite simple. Remember the rocky wall part that I was testing out earlier? Well, I just made 3 more of them and then just stuck them to the wall. And to be honest, I couldn't be happier with the result. So maybe, just maybe, the God tier build will actually be a God tier build. It might not be the worst of the 3. Now, craters. So this is the rough outline for 2 small craters and 1 larger crater. Now again, what I'm hoping to do in this video is, rather than just building something, I want to show you how to build a Lego trench mock that's high quality. So let me explain what I've actually done to build these craters. The way that I've done the small crater is incredibly simple. It quite literally is just 2 different parts laid on top of each other, and then all I've got to do is essentially take those pieces, plonk them down, rotating them like so. Now, the reason why I've used dark brown in the base is because then you've got dark brown at the very bottom, and then you'll have like a top layer of soil, so it kind of looks like the terrain's being kicked up. Before I go any further, you'll notice these haven't been blended into the terrain yet, and they look a bit odd. We'll do that once the rest of the terrain's been built, but you can kind of template it out with just a small plate. Now the key thing is for these little craters is you don't want it to look too symmetrical. So let's do this one layer at a time. This is the bottom layer of the crater. You can see it's very similar. It uses both the same parts actually as the smaller craters, but we've used 2 of each to try and get like a bit of an odd pattern, a bit of like a more irregular pattern. And then you can also see I've used these plates around the side just so we can build up the terrain. So let's place those down onto the dark brown plate. And there you go. That's our first layer of the larger crater. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, the second layer is much more simple. This is the second layer of the crater. To create this layer, it's simply 4 of the exact same part. It's 3x3 wedges, which are slightly bigger than, well, I guess that's obvious, slightly bigger than the 2x2 wedge. And there you go, that's the second layer of the crater, and you can see it's not exactly symmetrical, because you've got a crack down the middle, and then you kind of got a square at a 90-degree angle. This is the third layer of that crater. Now, this is a really simple layer. It's simply using 4 of the exact same part again, but it's going to be at a slightly different angle to the one below it. These are, I think, 2x3 wedges. They're irregular. They're not at 45 degrees like this is. And again, we're just going to slap that layer down onto the build. And there you go. That is the top layer of the crater on. And you can see again, like it's at a slightly different angle to the layer below it. Now, we will be, as you can see on this crater here, adding a few more bits on, like so, because you kind of don't want it to be perfectly square. Now, all I've done is I've gone and grabbed a few bricks over here, and then what we do is I just add them around here, and hopefully you'll see how this kind of brings it to life a little bit. And there we go, I've got the craters in, and I've tried to blend them into the terrain and also built them over the top of these tiles, because again, we're gonna go for a tiled aesthetic here. To be honest, I don't really currently like how it looks. So I'm probably gonna, before I do anything else, first take this crater out. We like it 2 steps forward, 10 steps backwards. It's kind of how I do things. Now it looks a bit more natural. They were just too close together once I'd actually blended them in, and I'm a lot happier with that distribution now. It looks less busy, it doesn't look crammed. Next thing I'm going to do is bring up this bottom layer so it matches the rest of the terrain. Now I've also got these little slope thingies, which I'm going to just try. Again, I really am just chucking stuff down and hoping for the best. I honestly think it sort of is kind of working. I'm going to continue to try and eliminate as many studs as I can, but in a creative way if possible. Now, after a bit of off-camera building, this is what we're now working with. You can tell me whether or not you think I've ruined it. I think it looks okay. It's not quite what I was hoping for, if I'm honest, but it does the job. And with that, let's finally place the German army. Now, for those of you wondering whether or not I'm going to implement the tank, you see, I just don't think it works on this build. Ah, well, we'll stick it to the side for now. What we can definitely do, though, is get the German army placed onto the base plate. And there we go. Honestly, I'm actually quite glad I decided to use the tank. Whether or not it lives up to the God tier build will be up to you. So hopefully you learned something about how to build a LEGO World War I trench mock, the parts, the techniques that are used. Basically, hopefully you got something out of that, because I don't really like the God tier build, to be honest. But let me know in the comments below. Subscribe. Happy New Year, and catch it a bit. Christ, I'm getting worse. The more videos I make, the worse I get at commentary. I don't know how.